Well, hey, let's get to building on the RC10T. Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Adam. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And today's video, we're going to start building the RC10T. Well, I won't lie. It's built. There's nothing in here but the body. So I haven't gotten the body painted. I'm still trying to figure out, do I want to do the box art paint or do I want to do something different? But regardless, the painting is going to take a while, both because there's going to be a lot of masking off to do the roll bar section and, you know, whatever livery decide to put on it. So today's video is all going to be about the build of the chassis. Here is the chassis. So it looks and feels great. I love the laser engraved RC10T, and you have your little certificate sticker, I guess, there. It's the, you know, celebrating anniversary of the kit and everything. And as you see, there's no motor ESC receiver in here yet. There will be. I just haven't figured out what motor I want to put in here. And, you know, I've got the 1060 and my Spectrum receiver that's going to go in there. They just figured not needed right now. Let's just focus on the chassis. Overall, if you have experience with the RC10s, the build isn't bad. The instructions, however, are not so great. So you do get a hard copy manual in here, so it's not like the anniversary edition where you had to you know, download your manual and everything. Why they did that, I don't know. You know, printing this thing can't be very expensive. I get junk mail on a daily that's, you know, more elaborate and better printed than this. But we'll get into the issues with that here in a minute. Just a word to the wise, you know, I haven't built the anniversary kit. It's still sitting over there in the box. I don't know if I'm going to build or not. I have two gold pans here. One is kind of a shelf queen. One is a runner. And then the CC down here is, you know, just a shelf queen. Now, obviously, the last one I built was the CC. And man, getting screws in that is a chore. Now, compared to that, to this stuff is butter. So be careful over tightening screws. This plastic, while, you know, flexible and probably is going to be very durable, is on the softer side. So you do have to kind of show some restraint and finesse when you're putting the screws in here, or you will strip things out. Overall, like I said, everything went well. I will put up a montage of the build and you guys can see it built. And then once that's done, I'm going to come back and we're going to discuss the instructions. So enjoy kind of the build footage. You know, it's just a bunch of clipped up pictures of how it went together. And you may notice some issues along the way. Forgot one or two things, but enjoy that. We'll be right back. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the kind of photo montage of this going together. I enjoyed building it, but there are some issues with this thing, and we're going to get into those now. The first thing I'm not a fan of, and this goes with Associated's modern manuals as well, this page here. This is annoying as hell. While you're building it, you are having to flip back to this page and figure out, is this the right size screw? Is this the right size screw? Is this the right size screw? Putting them here on scale on the pictures would not be terribly difficult. But that's a minor thing. It's just annoying having to flip back and you're like, oh, okay, what do I need? All right, shit, what page was I on? Okay, let's go back to that. And as you can see, I've marked off random things. So the front end goes together fairly straightforward. The only issue with the front end is you have the main chassis tub and then you have your nose plate here. In the instructions, it says, mount the nose plate to the chassis and, use this little 1/4-inch screw to screw it into this one hole for right now. And then your other two holes are actually where the steering pivots are. Not a big deal, except they don't tell you which freaking hole to put this in. So, strength-wise, I figured, okay, it's probably supposed to go in the most further up holes in kind of the short wheelbase fashion. I figured maybe the long wheelbase is a modification you can make to make it a little bit more racy. No, you need to make it in the long wheelbase format. I don't know why you get those other holes there. So basically the problem is, once you mount it into the short wheelbase version, the steering doesn't do its steering thing because it's hitting the front bulkhead. It shows the screw going up through the bottom chassis, and then up here levitating is the nose, and then it shows a little line going up, but it doesn't, you can't tell where the hell that goes. So make it in a long wheelbase chassis, you'll be fine. Second thing is, it does not come with a servo horn. That's fine. Almost every servo you buy comes with a package of servo horns. That's easy enough to, mount a servo horn to. What length is it? Is it this long? Is it this long? Is it this long? Is it this long? They could just put a recommended, between, 15 and 25 millimeters, because you kind of have to fart around with it to figure out where the holes got to line up. And the first one I did, I mounted it too low, and the rod was almost hitting on the servo, so I had to pull that one off and, fix up another one. It's not a big deal, but it's not hard to, say, mount from center hole to the ball end connector, make it approximately this long. That was a pain in the ass. Then you get into the rear end build. Now on the rear end build where you're building the hubs, you get 6 little tiny shims that go in between the outer bearing or bushing and the roll pin. It shows 1 here, and it doesn't say, shim as needed. So you can put 1, you can put 2. Technically, you could probably fit 3 in there, more than likely. So shim it to what you need to shim it to. And it should say that, add shims as needed. Easy enough. If you've never built one and don't know how these work, you're just going to put 1 in there and your axle is going to be bobbling back and forth. Right now I've got 2 in there and there's just a tiny little bit of play. It's possible I could have put the 3rd in there, but it may have ended up dragging on the bushing. Also buy a bearing kit for it. I have bearings for the RC10 and none of them fit. These are all just regular standard bearing sizes, but all the ones for the RC10s are, you know, flange bearings on the wheels and flange bearings back here and, you know, random other stuff. So I really didn't have any bearings for this. I thought I was going to be able to use the bearings that I have on hand for the RC10s. Nope. Get you a bearing kit, because all this thing comes with is bushings, and that's what I had to build it with. So eventually this will come apart and bearings will go in, but for now we're going to run it on bushings. All right, then we get to the shock build. So in the CC kit, I had the same issue of what part is what. So you get this really bright white kind of hard plastic parts tree. Has all your shock pistons on it, and it has a whole bunch of different thin and thick spacers and all that stuff on there. And then you get your parts tree with the shock ends, and then you, in the bag of parts, you get O-rings and spacers and, you know, all your E-clips and all that stuff. So when you're building the shocks, it tells you to use one of the little flat clips off of here, and then a spacer, then an O-ring, then a big spacer, then an O-ring, then a little spacer. These spacers all come off this parts tree. The little tiny ones that look identical to those spacers actually are the 4 that go into the rear shocks as a limiter in the shock length. So it stops it from drooping, but so much more. You know, it's like 1/8 of an inch total. So you're not, you know, honestly, I would just stick, if you have some spare O-rings, I would just stick, you know, 1 or 2 O-rings in there, and it would actually probably work better. But to prevent confusion, the white parts are all for the internals of the shocks, and then the other 4 little clear ones are for the rears. You know, fairly easy to figure out, but, you know, also just trying to help you guys out. Now, for the rod ends, you get short ones and long ones. It doesn't tell you which one to use. Shock rod end, build 2 front and 2 rear. That's helpful. Use the long ones. The short ones, the spring perches down here are so long, the short ones, it would actually push up on the spring perch. Probably wouldn't be a awful thing, but the long ones fit as they're supposed to, so you want to use the long perches there. Now, the rest of the shock build goes together fine, no problems. Mounting the shocks. You have your bolts sticking up here on the front and the rear for the tops to go in. You get your, you know, bushings and everything to fit in there. Now the bottom on the fronts say use a 440 by 5/8 screw to mount it into the front arms. And then on the rear it says use a 440 by 5/8 screw to mount to the rear. The problem is you get 2 440 by 5/8 and 2 440 by 3/4. So, you know, trial and error. You know, I held it up to the front. The front is exactly 5/8 of an inch thick. So if you put it through there, it goes through the front, goes through the shock, goes through the back, and no bolt sticks out the back. And the 3/4 will fit in here, although they look like they're going to be too long. They actually do thread in there just fine. So just make note of that. For the fronts, you use a 5/8. For the rears, you use the 3/4. And for all I know, in your kit, you may get 5/8 on both sides. I don't know whether they goofed up or they just goofed up. So once you get shocks on, you move on to the diff build, and you know, it's fairly straightforward. The only confusing-ish part is in here, it shows you have your thrust bolt. This goes through the whole thing and bolts it together. You have a thrust washer, a bunch of balls, and then another thrust washer that you have to assemble. But in the bag, you get a assembled thrust bearing, and then you have your 2 washers on each side of that. So it's pretty straightforward. The only problem I have with, the only reason I'm mentioning it is in the front here, oh, diff thrust washer, and it shows the actual bearing in there. Back here, it just shows random balls. Why can't you get the same stuff straight in the front and the rear? For the transmission, when you build a transmission, it's fairly straightforward. You know, there's not a whole lot going on there. A few bushings, bearings, whatever. The gears go in a very specific way. You know, the gears can really only go in kind of one way, except for the output shaft. You just have to make sure it's pointing out to the right-hand side of the car, where it mounts to the motor plate. Obviously, you don't want it sticking out this way. But the issue was, I missed, you have to install the roll pin into the slipper shaft before you mount the motor plate. If you mount the motor plate, there is no way to get that roll pin in there. So you have to remove the motor plate and then put that roll pin in. So as soon as you get your cases together, mount that roll pin through the shaft, and then you can put the motor plate on and put the screws in that hold the cases together. Now, when you put those in, you're going to have a tendency to probably over tighten it. You know, feel it. If it feels like it's dragging and binding, you know, just back those screws off just a tiny little bit and try it again. And a lot of times it will go from kind of like really difficult and bindy feeling to a whole lot smoother. So you need to tighten it, but don't, you know, man, crank it down. You're just going to create excessive wear and drag in the transmission. The other issue, you don't get a pinion. And they even say in the manual, hey, we don't give you a pinion. You're going to run it based off of the motor setup that you put into it. Yeah, but you could at least give an example. You know, recommended between 14 and 23 teeth. You know, you could pick a number in between there and say, I'm going to put in an 18 or whatever. You know, give me an idea. Because in the front, it basically says, pinion gear, size to be determined by the type and wind of motor you use. Nothing remotely recommended at all. I don't know. I still don't know what pinion I'm going to put in here. I don't know what is normal. I'm probably going to have to refer to one of those and see what size pinion I have in those. Not very helpful. And then lastly, wheels and tires. These are 3-piece wheels, B-locks. So you have the little tiny ring that goes inside the tire. It's nice and flexible, so it's easy to get into the tires. And then you have to, you know, get the bead kind of going around that, and then you can put your fronts and rears on. Now, be careful with the wheels. Again, this plastic is fairly soft, and it is very easy to keep cranking on those because there's a real fine line between, is that tight or is that stripping? So, you know, just be careful. You kind of can see where the screw comes out flush with the back of the wheel or just under flush. So essentially, you know, crank them down. You know, you kind of have to work around it, get the bead right so they kind of click together. And then once they're together, you just tighten up a little bit and like going around kind of crosswise as you're tightening up. So, you know, tighten this one, tighten this one, tighten this one, tighten this one, and just kind of keep going in that little cross pattern until the front part of the rim and the rear part of the rim are kind of flush in the center. You got, I don't have a wheel off, but you'll be able to tell when that center part meets the rear part of the other wheel. And at that point, stop. Like I said, it is very difficult to determine, is it tightening up or is it just stripping out? So be careful with that. So, you know, I'm not trying to bash on them, but I've had issues with associated manuals before. They're not the greatest. I'm just going to leave it at that. But overall, I had a good time building it. Just a few hours here and there over the course of 2 days. But I did want to get this video out to you guys if you guys are building one of these and or, you know, trying to get yours all set up. Now, one more thing on the setup. So you'll notice the rear tires have a lot of camber to them. And the front end has a lot of toe out. The toe out I'm not terribly concerned about. It's a little much, but the rear camber is basically, you're going to be riding on, you know, these outside spikes. So you got to lay these tires out a little bit flatter than that. And it's not like it changes, you know, the entire stroke. The tires are like this. I built all the links in here exactly to the specifications, and I had the exact same problem with the CC is, you know, bad toe in the, or bad camber in the rear and excessive toe out in the front. So I'll probably adjust a little less toe in the front and get these tires to where they're sitting flat. So the contact patch is going to be using all the tread and not just those inside 3 spikes like it's currently sitting. Because like I said, you know, it really doesn't change through the cycle. It's just wrong. You know, I don't get it. For the rear, you get 3 different caster blocks back here to angle the, you can either have 0, I think it's 1.5 or 3 degrees of forward kick on the rear arms. I went with in the middle at the 1.5. Again, 0 help from the instruction manual. You know, there's no help, setup help to this at all. It's, you know, follow the poorly done IKEA pictures, and we're not going to give you much more information than that type manual. Anyway, guys, again, I'm not trying to bash on them, but just trying to help you guys out. So I hope you guys enjoyed the quick look at the build of the truck. I'll get the electronics in here. I'll get the body painted when I have time. And once I've figured out what it's going to look like, and it'll be back and it will get a ride on the track. I will be sticking one of the A-Main chassis stickers on here just to protect it. It's just wide enough for the tub. So I'll be sticking one of these on there and getting the... so I can run it without tearing up that front kick up and all that stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a stretch because I really want to protect the front, but I also want to protect the rear. So yeah, we'll figure it out. I've got two of them. If I need to, you know, chop in a little section back there, I'll do that. But I'd rather burn up, you know, two of these to get this thing protected and not bang it all up. Anyway, guys, everybody out there, you guys be happy, be healthy, be safe, and I will catch you on the next one. See you guys.